Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. We're broadcasting live from the Heartland Cafe today, so all you people up here in the 49th Ward and nearby, come right on over and join us. That was John Fogerty and Bruce Springsteen doing Fortunate Son, and that's a prelude to one of our guests. Our own Tom Clark's going to talk a little bit, and we also have Darlena Burnett and her handsome husband, Walter Burnett, and we also have Duet Lay, and we have David Herrero and Caleb Mulholland, who are going to talk about some stuff going on down in Pilsen about living together and making music and art together.
It's a test we give Michael to say names at the start of the show. It's a little test.
Yeah, well,
he did good.
Katie.
He did real good.
It's good for me to be back. I miss Katie kind of bantering in my ear, correcting me as we go forward.
Yeah.
Hey, good morning, Tom. Good morning, Katie.
Good morning, Michael.
Welcome back, Michael.
How are your travels?
I was up in New Mexico. I was over in El Paso. I did see the Twin Peaks guys, and I had a great time, and I am inspired to be back here in Chicago and to carry on with all of the marching season going forth.
Speaking of which,
did you march through any sanctuary cities on your trek out to the Southwest?
I don't know if El Paso is a sanctuary city, but there certainly are a lot of there's certainly a lot of immigrants there, as well as longtime people of Mexican descent, as well as many others.
He was staying with major resistors in Las Cruces.
Well,
they're within 100 miles of the border.
Yeah,
it's
so I had to go through a border
story.
checkpoint on my way to Truth or Consequences. I mean, within 100 miles, they got every road covered.
I raised it because I thought the biggest news of the week, sort of buried in the usual rollout of other stuff from the White House, is U.S. court judge saying, no, you can't cut off funds for cities that claim sanctuary. And
we did
the
hear
legal
that,
battles
and we're glad.
continue to challenge executive orders left and right. It's interesting how the resistance continues.
So today we're marching again. We're marching for the climate, for our environment. And I was actually supposed to be off this show.
Yeah, but it's cold and rainy out, so she's warming up and becoming inspired before she goes downtown.
Is that what's going on?
I think so, Kate.
I see. The People's Climate March today is, I think it starts at 11 down at the Federal Building. And we'll go as long as people are there to march. It will, I think it, unfortunately, to my mind, all these marches go to the something tower now.
And if for some reason the weather scares you or you have other things to do, you can watch it live on CAN TV.
There's
one of our
something.
favorite outlets.
Okay, so let's see. We also want to say rest in peace for Robert Persig, author of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, one of our key books of our early youth. Late youth, early adulthood.
That's probably time to read it again.
I think it is time to read it again.
Yeah.
I've been digging for it. I know I still have it on my bookshelf, but buried, because I think it would be a good time
I
to
have it
bring
in a
back
box
out.
in my storage, along with other paperbacks I call classics.
She's going to
Speaking
sell
of
them on
which, did
eBay
you-
when she gets older.
Did you
Yeah,
know
right.
today was Independent Bookstore Day?
Independent Bookstore Day. No, I didn't know that.
And in fact, there's a whole string of bookstores. You can look it up on the web. If you go and buy books at one and then visit 10 others, you can get 10% off at all for the rest of the year.
There was actually an article somewhere I saw yesterday that said the independent bookstores are on the rise, and they have been on the rise for a while as the big box stores kind of go out. So all those people who wanted to have a bookstore may want to think again about actually opening one. And I hope that my wife Paige was awake and heard that.
Amazon is selling clothes now, so forget them. Listen, we're going to cut short this banter because there is something going on, and it comes to mind because of the screening of the Berrigan film tomorrow. The colloquium on Loyola student activism is this afternoon, and then tomorrow is the screening of the Berrigan film. But it brings to mind a time when not all of us, but two of the hosts here were right here on campus, just to the south of us. Tom Clark was a Loyola student, and I was a Mundelein student. There was still a Mundelein
AKA
back
Mundel
then.
Bundle.
And we were all very, very active anti-war protesters and activists in a variety of ways, had been for years by the time that we're talking 1971. And Tom, who was a former seminarian, as I used to say, us girls who actually cared about anti-racism could only date. We could only find men who took it seriously amongst the seminarians. So that's who we hung out with, right? Because they were the ones who were not afraid of dealing with anti-racism in this very segregated city back then. So Tom was a good friend, and Tom was also a Catholic activist in the terms from back then.
Probably
and I'm going to ask
is.
you to describe what that means. But you actually took an action with 3 other cohorts. You guys became the 4 of us, and you went into the most sending draft office near us, which was Evanston, and poured. You can tell us what it was.
Tell us about that day, Tom, 46
poured
years
blood
ago.
on
what did you do
files.
46 years ago?
Okay, you can answer Michael's question.
On a
since-
Thursday afternoon, we walked into the Evanston Selective Service office on Chicago Avenue with 2 reporters and proceeded to pour cow's blood that we had gotten through a Department of Agriculture permit from the stockyards, which still produced agricultural product like that at the time. And we did that in lieu of human blood, which we thought should be used by humans. But the symbolic act of pouring blood was a return, we thought, to a more traditional form of civil disobedience, which had been kind of tossed to the side by Weather Underground and other folks who were doing drive-by actions to try to bring the war back home. We thought those
Did you get that subtle put down?
we
Drive-by.
thought that those it was important for all of us to resist the war, but there were only a few of us doing it, and there was a lot of by the early 70s a lot of discussion about what was the appropriate form. To set the scene for younger listeners, this was just a short time after the Conspiracy 8 trial had taken place and all its theatrics in federal court. There had been a smaller profile Chicago 15 trial. The panel I'll be on tomorrow at the Darst Center in Bridgeport includes a member of the Milwaukee 14 who did their draft board action, burning of records, just a year or so before ours. What we were trying to do was stop the war machine and stop young men being sent over to a war we thought was illegal and immoral. And if some of those phrases sound familiar to some of the situations we live with today, the big difference is that back then men were being drafted. You didn't have a choice. Today we have an economic draft when if you can't find another job, you sign up for the military, and that's how you get to go and serve in Afghanistan and Iraq and whatnot, our current hotspots of undeclared wars. So we were trying to put the war on trial, and 9 months later, after being arrested, we did go to trial. 3 of us defended ourselves, and we beat 3 of the 4 counts. It was rather remarkable.
Yeah, it was totally remarkable.
We actually put the war on trial, and through the use of character witnesses and some other witnesses, although as the trial went along, the judge got firmer and sterner, and some of our witnesses were not allowed to testify. But in contrast to the Conspiracy 8, which was used by the media a lot, we were the clean-cut ex-seminarians and nuns who were stopping the war, not some, ragtag hippie group, I guess, is what they were thinking. That's a long answer to your first question.
yeah, that
that's
was
good, though.
That was full. What was
Who was the judge? Who was the judge?
Alexander Napoli, a grandfatherly sort who kind of, I think, thought we were a nice, quiet group of folks, and sure, we can go ahead and defend ourselves. I think he realized halfway through the trial what we were pulling off, which was a lot of incriminating testimony by some expert witnesses, by our character witnesses. I had a Marine in full Marine dress as one of my character witnesses, along with my parish pastor. It was just a very good theater, which is really the point I want to make as this thing comes back every year after 46 years. We need to practice civil disobedience more effectively than we have been in recent years.
Yeah,
That was my next question, was what are the ramifications of your action and its legacy for the younger people and some older people who are engaging again in civil disobedience?
We committed a crime looking forward to the court case that would come out of it so that we could present a trial against the war. everything that we did leading into the April 29th action had a purpose in terms of the literature we left behind, what we said in the draft board office, all of which came back in testimony by the prosecution's witnesses 9 months later. And it just set up a scene that many other groups that came together at that time, because there were a lot of different Catholic left actions going on. One of the more intriguing ones in the Midwest being the Beaver 55.
The Beaver 55, that was my favorite.
Tell us what about that. Where were they?
Well, they erased computer tapes in Midland, Michigan that were being used by Dow Chemical to make napalm. And probably people have heard about napalm or seen the pictures of innocent civilians being affected by it. And certainly a lot of GIs and other Vietnamese were affected by it. And that was their way of bringing the war home, was to destroy part of the war-making machine.
Yeah, but there probably weren't 55 of them, and the beaver part was something of a joke.
Yes, it was.
So I loved that we got that we had fun with our civil disobedience.
We tried to bring some humor to the serious work that we were doing.
Well, Tom, this is kind of a warm-up for the 50th anniversary in 4 years, and we'd like to have you back on the show not only as a host, but also to talk about this action again. But one of the things that I'm always interested in is what happens to people who are active. And all of us who are getting up in our years know a lot of people who are still active, and I just wanted to know what are you doing now, and what are the other folks doing now?
Johnny Bransky, who was a couple years ahead of me in school, has been out in the Northwest for most of his adult life.
Portland, Oregon.
He was an accountant for the St. Vincent de Paul Society for many years. He also continued his resistance work and actually served time in prison, not only for draft board resistance, but later he and his wife were very involved with the anti-Trident work in the harbor, very dangerous, confronting big destroyers in a flotilla of floatable rafts, talking about putting your life in harm's way. Mary Beth Lubbers, now Pine Dubois, lives in the Boston area where she's an environmental activist trying to save the backwaters of freshwater supply in the area around Boston. And Eileen Kreutz, who many people know because she stayed in Chicago along with me for many years as a carpenter, a fine craftswoman, and a trainer with Chicago Women in Trades.
Yeah,
and,
nice.
Is a retired carpenter, glassmaker out in Maine.
And besides,
we are all still in resistance.
I want to thank you for your activism then and now, Thomas.
It's pretty amazing that we've been able to stay together and in touch and support each other. And I don't think any of us believed 46 years ago we'd still be talking about this.
No, I think a lot of us thought we'd be living in a utopia by now with some kind of a progressive state. But clearly, this is an ongoing process than many of us thought. And we're glad that we do have an opportunity now to pull a lot of people off of their couches and get them into the streets.
So in keeping with that time, music that really came out of the Kent State strike activities at Loyola and Mulholland, which is really what brought this group together in 1970. And then they lived in a commune in Uptown and then developed the research around this action in Evanston. So the music of the time was very much reflected in this piece by Jefferson Airplane. Take it away, Nolan.